We've got the lovely Goldwing bobber up on the stand here, and we're going to today address a potential leak in the water pump system. So if we come around up to here and we go, there's the radiator, we're gonna have to take that off, and then we go down below here, we've got our oil filter, we're gonna have to take that whole front cover off. And coming down from that hose from the radiator, we've got the water pump cover. So basically both the water pump cover and the oil filter are on what's a front cover. Not the front cover up here for the timing belts, this guy here, that's that guy. But there's also another cover down here, sort of it's a transmission cover is another term for it. And so we need to take that off. And if you come around to the side here, you can kind of see in there, there's a couple bolts that hold that cover on. It's just below. It's kind of just below this timing belt cover. The other cover is inside here. And so I'm going to be taking that whole transmission cover off, but first I'm going to be taking off the radiator. And so even before that, I'm going to be draining the oil and the coolant out. So let's do that first. So we'll do the oil here first. Alright, let's try draining out some water into this thing. So interestingly, there seems to be no oil in the water, but lots of water in the oil. So I'm not sure what that means, but observation time. Alright, and now I'm going to disconnect where the bottom of the radiator hose goes into the water pump here. There's two 8mm bolt heads right here. I'm going to take those off and disconnect that. And then there should be a rubber O-ring behind that guy. And then I'm going to take this guy off behind it. There's four bolts to hold on the little cover behind that. Alright, then we need to get the radiator out of there so we can see better. So radiator on the bottom here, 10mm bolt here. And same on the other side of the bike. And then from here, we go up, and right up here, there's also another 10mm bolt right here, comes off, and same on the other side over there. All right, so before I can get the radiator all the way out of there, I gotta disconnect this top tube to the radiator, which is this hose right here. Disconnect that guy with this little hose clamp right there. All right, so there are 9 more 8mm bolts that hold this cover on. There's like 4 or 5 along the top here, right just underneath the timing belt cover. And then there are a few on the sides, on either side there. I think I've got them all. Let's get out the rubber mallet. Take a rubber mallet, try and break this loose a little. Alright, so looking at the back, the inside cover of this thing, I may have found the problem. You can see this is the water pump right there. This is a little oil seal on the back side of the water pump. And this is what the backing was left. It had just completely separated off. Yeah, so you could see the ball bearings in there. And that thing was toast. It was probably just pumping water right into the freaking oil. No good, dude. All right, so going back over to the engine on the bike, you can see this guy right here. That's where the gear drive for the water pump is. And that's an oil seal that we're looking at. You can see how it's sort of gnarly looking and mashed up. So that also needs to be replaced, and there's an O-ring around that oil seal on the outside that also needs to be replaced. I've got both of those. We're going to be doing that, and then there's another O-ring right next to it here. That guy right there that goes to an oil passage, and we'll be replacing that as well. I've also got O-rings for on the side here. This guy right there, there's an O-ring for that. That one's over there, and on the other side of the engine over here, there's an equivalent one, which you can see right up in there. So I've got O-rings for those guys. So my next step is to go ahead and clean up this gasket surface here. You can see the gasket's come off there, but it's still stuck on right there. So I'm gonna go around this whole thing and clean that gasket material off and make sure that surface is nice and smooth. I'm gonna do that on both the engine side here and on the cover side that's already off. All right, now we're gonna take the water pump out of this front cover part, this transmission cover. There is our water pump down in there. You can see the little splines on the pump. So it comes off from the back. 3 bolts on here. All right, then I gotta knock this cover off the front here. Water pump, it should come out now. The water pump's wiggling like that. That's a bad sign. Shouldn't wiggle. Let's hit it with a hammer. Ah, that works. There's the old water pump with its messed up bearings and all that stuff in there. And that was mainly, I believe, where our leak was coming from. So you can see there's a couple more O-rings on this one. There's an O-ring that goes around this section here. We've got a replacement for that. And there's an O-ring that goes around this section here. We've got one of those as well. Those 3 things are the main things that the climber's manual, at least, it says if you've got water in the oil, to do this. But we're gonna do that plus a couple other O-rings while we're in here. Got all the gasket stuff cleaned up on this one. I've now got to go ahead and clean up this one here and get those surfaces prepped as well. All right, our next move on this one is to take out the old oil seal right here, as well as the couple O-rings that are around that. So the oil seal itself, that's this guy right here. I'll put these part numbers in the description of the video as well as links to where I got them. These are parts that don't come in the generic gasket kit you can get. I'm just gonna use this bent screwdriver here, this 90-degree screwdriver, and pull this guy out. Alright, next I want to go in here and grab this O-ring out. Get the old O-ring out of there. And I'm just using some spark plug gapper tool to do that. Pull that one out, and then there's the one. So there's that guy, and this one is this part number right here. And there's this guy over here, and that's this part number. Alright, that comes off with the little bezel whatever thing this is. So I'll go ahead and clean this up, clean these guys up, and then we'll put new O-rings on. Alright, and then here is the oil seal. This guy here, it's got a dish side here, and this is the side that goes in towards the engine. And this is the outward facing side here. This is the one we want to see, so I'm going to put it in like this. Alright, and then I'm just going to use a socket that is roughly the same size as the actual seal and I'm using the broader end here. It has more surface area on this side of the socket, and I'm using that to go in here, press against there, and then I'm going to tap this with a hammer and help seat that all the way flush with the engine. So there it is. That's how I've got it. It's just past flush, basically. There's a recess in the bottom of that you can see, and it should seat against that recess. Basically, there's a cutout in the engine specifically for that thing to go down and stop on. So I just lightly tap it in until it stops. So that is how it looks when it's done. Just like that. Alright, we have also got on here a little O-ring that we need to replace, which is right up there. It's this guy right there. You can see that it's got some coolant coming out of there. There's actually a coolant passage that runs through there. And so we need to put a new O-ring around there. You can see the old one that goes outside of that little tab. So I'm going to take that O-ring off, put a little new one on there. And that's an O-ring I could not find a part number for. I just happen to have an O-ring around there's the appropriate size to work for this application. Alright, our final 2 O-rings are the same part number. This one right here. And these guys, one goes right over there, and the other one goes on this side of the engine, right over there. Then another O-ring that I missed again on the parts diagram from the manufacturer is one that's over on this side of the engine. It goes right in here. One of these little metal tabs that goes up in here. And an O-ring goes around that. And the O-ring I happen to have in an O-ring set, one that fits this perfectly. The O-ring is an 11/16 inch by 7/8 inch. And it's this guy right here. Alright, so we've got the one tab thing over here that we put an O-ring on, the little one that was a coolant passage. There are a couple more of those little tabs, but they're more like alignment tabs. There's one down here. There's another one up in here behind this bar. And those are not passages. Those are just alignment tabs. So don't worry about those. Do not have O-rings that go on them. So now we're done with the O-rings. We're done with the oil seal. We are moving on to putting the new oil pump on the front cover, on the transmission cover part. New to me water pump. It is used off a different engine, but it is very solid. It looks like it's in great condition. And so I'm going to use this thing. And what we have to do to this thing is put two O-rings on it. I've got a big O-ring, which is this guy here. And we've got a little O-ring. So we'll put those on. I'll start with the big one. Guys, fits on like so, and there's a little groove down here. That one goes in just like that. We got the little guy. That one just fits around this little base here, just like that. And that's all there is to it. Now we got to install it back into our housing. I will now insert the water pump straight into here. The back side of it. All right. So it's like that. I should be able to push it into place. All right. So now that guy's in there. Now I need to bolt it down, and that will help cinch everything up there. I'm just snugging these down. You could probably torque them to like 7 foot-pounds or less. And look at, oh, that thing is so solid. Fantastic. All right, so that's that for this right now. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and put the gasket on this guy. And I'm actually going to try and adhere the gasket to this, because it's such a pain in the ass to get gasket material off of the actual engine. It'd be way easier to have the gasket come off with this guy and then not have to deal with gasket material on the engine if you ever need to take this apart again. Alright, the manual doesn't give any torque specs, the climber's manual doesn't at least, and so I'm going to tighten these down. And this is totally my own judgment, make your own judgment on this, but this is what I'm doing. I'm going to tighten them down to 7 foot-pounds just because that's a safe torque for, it should be a safe torque spec for aluminum. It shouldn't pull any threads out that way, but it should give me, I'll have a torque spec at least, and it should give me a nice even pressure on that gasket all the way around, which is what I want. Alright, so next I've got the cover for the water pump as well as the little gasket for that cover. So this guy goes on like so, and I'm going to go ahead and spray some copper coat on the back side of this, and then we'll install it on there. go ahead and torque those down as well. Same thing, 7 foot-pounds. All right, that cover is on. We are well on our way now. All right, so basically the rest of it is just putting the radiator back on. All right, so our final gasket, I believe, our final O-ring is the one on the end of this radiator hose here. This is how it connects to the bottom there. And this guy here is nice and flat. And it's been on there a while, clearly, so I'm gonna go ahead and take that off. And we'll put on a new one. Alright, then our new one should go in there without too much problem. Alright, so despite this being a new oil filter on here, I just put that on like a month ago. I'm gonna go ahead and change that because we've had water in the oil, so we don't want that. And I don't know what that would do to the filter, but at the very least it will retain water and add water back to the new oil that I put in here. So let's not do that. I'm gonna go ahead and change this out. All right, now we've got to get the radiator back on. All right, now we just need to put some coolant in here and some oil. Let's start out with the coolant. Double funnel. All right, then the next step is to add some oil. I may have to run to the store and get more oil. All right, now I need to flush the oil. So I've put oil in the bike once and drained it out. And now this is the second run of oil in the bike, and I'm going to drain it again to get the water that was residual in the engine out. All right, it's looking more like oil than it did last time, so I think we're headed in the right direction. All right, I'm hoping this is my final change. I've changed it. This will be the 4th time. Oh yeah. All right, that looks like actual oil this time. Nice. All right, I'm gonna let it drain out and we're gonna put more oil in it and we're done. We're finally fixed. We finally fixed this bike. Yeah! Oh my God. I really hope that's the end of all the bugs and that we can finally ride the bike.